We are live. There you go. First broadcast happening right now. Cool. Welcome, everybody. So we're going to try out this new live streaming software that we've got. So Karen Hyland from Mortgage Lab, who's based in Central Auckland, and myself are giving this a go. So first thing we've got to say on these live streams is none of this is personalized advice. We don't know your situation, but however, feel free to leave a comment below on Facebook or on YouTube, and we'll do our best to help you within the bounds of what you've asked. I think we've got a little clip to start off the video, so let's do that and then we'll get into it. So professional. Right. So welcome, everybody. Yeah, so I just wanted to introduce you to Karen Hyland. As I say, she's based in, what do we call it, Central Auckland? Yeah.
Central Auckland, yeah.
Yeah. And
Auckland.
Auckland-wide and nationwide, actually. We can do mortgages all over the country. And Karen has been with Mortgage Lab for about 3 years now, I think.
Yeah.
About right, eh? And just give us a little bit of a background of what you were doing prior to that and sort of how you got into the industry and stuff.
Yeah, so my background prior to joining Mortgage Lab was actually in human resources. So it's actually more common though, well, maybe not more common, but a lot more relatable than I think people first think of. They sort of hear that I'm in human resources and can't quite piece together how that became sort of financial advisor. But I mean, overall, I guess there's a lot of similarities and, you know,
that dealing with people, eh?
Advice roles, right? Troubleshooting. I love that, problem solving. And the benefit of this is it sort of includes the property side, which I love, and numbers.
The journey, eh? The journey.
Yeah, exactly.
It is a really emotionally fulfilling role, I think. Yeah.
It is. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Very rewarding. Yeah.
And yeah, no, that's great. So, I mean, what we're going to do today is basically talk. We're just going to kind of free range talk about sort of what's going on in the market. Probably one of the big things that happened just a couple of days ago, so we're actually not overly clear on all of the rules on it, is that tax deduction, the interest rate tax deductibility, and specifically new builds. Now, we probably won't go into it because for starters, it's just a proposal at the moment, despite the rules coming in 2 days. But I think, so in terms of construction lending, you've done a couple of these recently. Like, what are you sort of seeing out there? Are people really focused on buying new builds at the moment, or what's the sort of feel in the market?
Yeah, so there's definitely been more of an increase in construction lending. There's, a lot of construction going on out there. So, yeah, and, I guess people have had a bit more, or have a bit more time up front, I think, to be able to think about the purchase. I think, prior, especially in the Auckland market, properties were going so quickly and they were going, the prices were going so high that people were sort of looking more towards construction because it gave them time to get their ducks in a row, get their lending sorted, and so forth. So I've definitely seen that space
the
ramp
price is set, right? Like that, you know what you're paying. Oh man, if we had $1 for every person that had come and rung us and said there's an auction on Thursday, we need to get there.
Exactly.
And they get outbid, and it's that
it's
frame
tiring,
is such
right?
a nightmare. Yeah, and has led to a bit of buyer fatigue, I think, is what a lot of the advisors would say, right? Really, really good. That construction, you know exactly where the house is going to be, the price you're going to pay. And now the tax deductibility is for an investor is probably $15,000 better off. I'm not an accountant, so don't quote me on that. But yeah, it's that's a big difference between buying an existing investor property and new build, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
And the banks, are the banks kind of open? Are you finding the banks open to both construction lending and turnkey? They're sort of open for that?
Yeah, look, I think one of the really cool things are, a couple of banks have now focused their interest rates on new builds. So, it does show their support in new build properties, which is really great. And obviously, it's nice for the purchaser to have that lower interest rate as well. There
What is it?
are
It's
obviously
1.6 something, isn't it? That's the
Yeah, it's
lowest
about
one.
1.68 with one of them, 1.79 with another,
Mm,
which are great options. If we
great.
can get that, you can't really beat it. I think, there's definitely different criteria that needs to be met, though, with construction lending. And that's one thing that, I think buyers aren't necessarily aware of, right up front. And so pre-approvals, they can vary between existing homes and new builds. So I think it is really important to have those sort of conversations with your advisor up front, so you know
Yeah.
what it is that you're having to look for. Banks are often, wanting you to have a little bit more of a cash buffer with construction lending, in case there are cost overruns or, price changes and things like that. So it's really to, make sure that you're still going to be comfortable at the end of it.
Yeah. I know. I don't do many mortgages anymore, but I know whenever I've got to that to paying the deposit stage, you really have to walk the client through. This is a really messy bit, and you're trying to scramble for additional contracts, and you're trying to
Mm,
raise this sort of $70,000, and it seems a lot of work.
yeah.
But then for the
Yeah.
next, yeah, sorry,
There's
you
a
go,
lot
you
that
go.
happens in a short space of time.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. And so
And
I think
then
it
there's a
can be,
lull for
yes,
18 months.
yeah. And you can sit back and wait and watch the build happen, which is
Yeah,
kind of the fun
but
bit. Yeah,
1.68%, I mean, that is outrageous, right? And that lasts for 2 or 3 years, depending on which bank it is.
yeah,
So it's a
yeah.
real benefit there.
It is good.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, the other thing, and it kind of leads on to that buyer fatigue that we're seeing.
Mm.
I mean, you're in the Auckland market, so that's probably the more extreme example of that. People are just getting kicked to the curb. I have a feeling, and obviously this is totally crystal ball gazing, but if all of the investors are pushed towards new builds, then this may free up a bit of market. If you're a first home buyer, there won't be those queues at the. I mean, what do you think? That's
Yeah, it's that's an interesting take, I think. Be interesting to see what happens. Definitely investors are moving, more into that new build space. I think that first home buyers as well, if they're having to stretch their pennies that little bit further because of, higher prices, a lot of them are sort of also going to new builds, with less maintenance or with the view
yeah.
of less maintenance. So yeah, it would be interesting to see. Yeah.
That's a good point, actually, because this new thing seems to push investors into the new build, which would sort of by default push first home buyers into existing. But it's a little risky if you're at 90% on a first home buy your first home buyer at 90%, to then have suddenly a roof that needs replacing, or a leak or something, which existing houses have, which new builds are covered for in hopefully in their master builder guarantee. But
Absolutely.
yeah, if something
And
has to
if
be
you,
done.
yeah, no, for sure. And I think, as well with the existing homes, for those that have a lower deposit, the banks are really wanting these existing homes to be in a very good state. They're not wanting you to be buying do-ups or, houses that need roofs done and things like that.
Yeah,
And equally, if you don't have that, the cash sort of sitting in the bank to do that, you probably don't want to be buying it either.
you need a bit more than 20% for if you're going to do a full reno one, for sure.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's and there are more new builds coming on the market. I don't think they've solved the problem with the council, issuing enough resource consent, but at least
Yeah.
it's going to push
I think
developers,
they
right?
I think I just caught a little headline just before coming on, and they were saying that August has been one of the highest months for consents, even though, you know, we were in lockdown for a lot of that.
Yeah, that's fun. Maybe that was why
Yeah.
people, the council guys, are sitting at home
Catch up on the
actually
paperwork.
doing it. Yeah. And look, this is not personalized advice. Don't do this based on what I say, but I think investors would be thinking about selling existing properties. You know, they're not going to have to pay all the tax. It's implemented over the next 4 years on their rental income. But in 4 years' time, there's going to be a significant tax difference. So, you know, one of the problems we've had is supply in the market. And so if investors are suddenly offloading their old existing houses, which are still good houses, but not tax efficient, that may free it up for the first home buyer. So it's going to be an interesting next.
I always say it's an interesting time, and I think it just is in the property market, right? Every corner there's you know, there's something else. I mean, one of the other you know, I guess the good thing around, you know, buying a property that was previously a rental is the healthy home standards. So, you know, they're likely to come with heat pumps and you know, insulation and things like that, which, you know, you kind of want.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I think that those new rules are really good for investors. It was many decades ago now, but I lived in my fair share of student flats with what they would call indoor-outdoor flow, but I think they would call it just port.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Probably
one of the moving away from that, one of the frustrations that advisors have and therefore clients have is valuations, which are more often than not required for new build properties. I just wanted to talk a little bit about how we have to do valuations. So obviously we've got that how do you find that portal? You know, how do you find clients deal with that portal?
Yeah, I mean, the banks, obviously, they have approved valuers that they will use. So one of the key messages to clients is always don't go and source your own, because if they're not on the panel and it's not gone through the panel, the bank won't necessarily accept it, and it can be a lot of money, you know, down the drain. So, you know, going through the you know, the two provider panels that we have, you know, it keeps it relatively streamlined. I think what we've had, you know, lately is being in lockdown, we couldn't do valuations in level 4. So there's been a huge backlog, and there are delays with valuations now, which is causing, you know, a bit of angst with purchasers naturally. So being able to manage that, and also I think, you know, just as how fast the property market has been moving again over the last few months, valuers are in short supply. That's sort of increasing the price of the valuation, and also the time it takes to have those valuations completed. So there's a lot going on for the poor buyers.
And such a deadline industry, right? Like, I mean, the auction is this, or you've got 10 days of finance, and it's not the valuers' fault. We're not beating up on valuers because there's just not enough valuers for the amount of valuations that are required.
Absolutely.
But it is a source of frustration and stress for the buyers for sure.
Yeah.
The funny thing is that if your valuation has been delayed by a month, you've probably made $20,000 in Auckland.
Way to look at it.
2%. So delay it longer.
I mean, one of the things that I also talk to clients about is, you know, the common finance deadline is 10 days, but where we can actually extend that out longer, it's good to be able to have those sort of conversations early, you know, to be able to fit that all in. Because we've also got, you know, within their bank's approval, and there's been long delays there at times, so it all adds up.
Yeah, they've got to sign off the valuation. Yeah, I think our record in the company is about 55 days delay for a valuation. It was in a remote part of the north of the North Island, and I mean that's not going to meet a 10-day finance clause.
It's pretty tough.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
And
yeah,
and apparently there's also certain valuers, when it comes to apartments, there's only certain valuers that can actually value apartments, and there's less of them. Um,
yeah.
so,
I didn't know
yeah,
that, but yeah, it makes sense, right?
yeah,
They've got to know how the body corporates work and the ins and outs of particular buildings. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
But I think to pull it back to the original point that you made was it needs to be done through a system. For clarity, we don't get a cut of the amount. I think some people think that. So, we put it through our system so that we get $200. I mean, we get none of it. But what it does is it stops the oldie days of, say, a mortgage advisor ringing up a valuer and saying, "Oh, we need this to say, $1 million or whatever." It is completely independent. We don't talk to the valuer, so the valuer can go and give a true, accurate valuation. And that's the point of it, is that the banks know it's independent. So, yeah, really important that buyers don't go and source their own valuation. Even if they're going direct to the bank, right? It's still really important. Yeah. Yeah. And I guess interest rates is probably what everyone is interested to hear about. What are you seeing out there? Obviously, up would be the word, I think, that we use.
Yeah, yeah, that's definitely the way that they're heading. So we're sort of seeing rates around about 2.79, 2.85 for the 12 months. So conversations with clients now are definitely around, what is your long-term plan? What is your plan in a year's time, in 3 years' time? And we are sort of I'm definitely starting to see clients that, perhaps were happy to fix for shorter periods of time, and now looking at locking in for longer, or doing a split when maybe they hadn't done that before. There's definitely still a lot of people out there that are happy to just keep locking in that 1 year rate, and that's their strategy, and they're happy with that, and that's really good. But I think it kind of comes back to that conversation, and everyone's in a different scenario. Everyone's got a different comfort level as well. And I kind of always say to people, it's like, if you're going to ring me tomorrow because you can't sleep, then let's talk about this. I don't want you to have sleepless nights about it. Right? Once it's locked in, it's locked in. Let's minimize that.
Let's get it. Yeah, I reckon one of the worst things for people who aren't familiar with the market is they lock in something at 1 year, and then they talk to their neighbor, and the neighbor, oh
Yes.
no, I did 3 years, and there's a lot of regret. And I think you just have to understand why you are locking in, and that other people have different, the neighbor who said that might be self-employed, and so they want a surety of payments. You're a salary, so you want to knock down that mortgage. I would never compare your mortgage to anyone else's.
Absolutely. And in your mortgage term as well. I mean, so, people have mortgages for up to 30 years. So you're going to win some. You're maybe not going to win them all. But if you look at it, I think as long as you're making the right decision for you, you can't go too wrong.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know.
And I think this is probably the first time in a long time that I can remember that there's actually been a bit of a spread between the banks. I mean, if you sort of cast your mind back a year ago, and it was probably 2.2% or something. If you went to whatever blue bank and you'd get that same rate as you would at any other color bank, within 0.01% of an amount. But for the first time in probably 6 or 7 years, you're starting to see 0.3% difference, and they're not all moving at the same time. So really interesting timing. Now, that the issue with that is that if you jump over to this bank to try and chase that, they're going to, I think one bank raised it today, did they? They raised their 1 year rates today? Yesterday, yeah. I read it today. I'm a day behind.
There's probably another one coming today. Who knows?
Yeah. But really interesting times. Yeah, for that.
Yeah. And I think as well, you were sort of mentioning, prior about, what someone's mate might have got or what their neighbour would have got. And obviously as well, on, all the Facebook groups and things like that, people put up, their lowest rates and things. And I think that encourages people to then think about, potentially moving banks. And they forget that there's extra costs in refinancing as well. You've got solicitors' fees and things like that. And, perhaps saving $5 a month isn't going to really be the saving that you thought it would be.
That's
But
the big one,
equally,
eh?
yeah. And I think
Saving.
everyone wants to say they've got the lowest rate. And we absolutely want to get people the lowest rate, but it is around that bigger picture. What's it going to cost you to get that lower rate?
Yeah. If it's going to cost you $1,500 in solicitors' fees to chase that, as you say, it's easily $5, sometimes less. And the difference, and by the time you've changed it over, the bank is no longer offering that different rate. Chasing interest rates is a tricky deal.
Yes.
But anyway, cool. All right, well, hey, let's wrap it up there, because that was a great session, and thanks for joining us.
Cool. Thanks for having me along.
Cool. See ya.